Welcome back, fellow nostalgia seekers. This is Howling Through Neo Tokyo, where we hold on for dear life as master mangaka Katsuhiro Otomo takes us on a wild ride through the perilous streets of Neo Tokyo in his critically acclaimed manga, Akira. Last time, we watched as Tetsuo's burgeoning powers drew him to the top-secret military facility hidden at the Olympic site. He used those same powers to carve out a path of destruction and chaos as he tore down each and every opponent who tried to stand in his path to Akira. Kaneda and Kei, accompanied by the Colonel's spy, also made their way into the secret facility, after the Espers previously tasked them with stopping Tetsuo's mission to awaken Akira. Despite being outmatched and outgunned, they made their way into the depths of the facility unscathed, where they were present to watch Akira's awakening. After surviving the flash freeze that swept through the military base, Kaneda and Kei made their way to the surface, realizing along the way that the base was hidden under the crater left behind by the explosion that destroyed Tokyo 3 decades prior. Once on the surface, Tetsuo and Akira attempted to flee the facility, followed closely by Kaneda and Kei. However, the Colonel called in the big guns, firing his secret weapon, a satellite codenamed Soul. Its laser cannon incapacitated Akira, allowing him to fall into Kaneda and Kei's possession. It also tore Tetsuo's arm to bits, leaving him bloody and in agony at the end of the last chapter. For me, this is when I really started to get excited reading the manga. So I'm incredibly excited to share this part with you. I think while we've seen many divergences from the anime so far, the overall story has more or less functioned the same way. Now, I feel like the differences start to become more substantial to the underpinnings of the story, but in a good way. This has already been particularly evident with characters like Nizu and Miyako. They've been way more complete characters in the manga, and we'll see even more of that throughout the rest of the series. Moving forward, we're also going to learn so much more context about the Akira project, including its history and some of the geopolitics surrounding it. We'll also learn more about how the telekinetic powers function and manifest. We'll also get a bit more insight into some of the sci-fi underpinnings of story elements I honestly never even questioned despite their ambiguity in the anime. All that with a much bigger cast of characters. So, in other words, here's where we get all the good bits that always get lost in adaptations. I'm Boy Meets TV, and tonight I'll be your guide through Neo Tokyo's tangled web of dark secrets and psychokinetic wonders. Chapter 12, Enter Sakaki. Chapter 12 opens with Tetsuo, armed nothing more than dangling striations of flesh. Another blast from Soul bears down on him, and it appears there's nothing he can do aside from accepting his fate. Kaneda and Kei manage to get to cover nearby. Kaneda has the unconscious Akira on his back as they scramble into a cement tunnel. They look back towards the blast when Kei surmises there's no way Tetsuo could have survived it. Kaneda calls out to his former friend, but his voice seems to bounce right off the smoking and craggy landscape, without ever finding its target. The Colonel and his crew of scientists view the scene from the sky through Soul's camera system. The Colonel gives coordinates for the scientists to scan. The scientists can't get a reading no matter how many times the Colonel orders them to. The Colonel then slumps to the ground in frustration, his head falling into his hand. The scientists ask him what to do, and, uncharacteristically, he tells them it no longer matters. Elsewhere, we see one of Lady Miyako's followers give her a status update. It seems they had been observing the skirmish on the outskirts of the city, which has now dissipated. Nizu, the Resistance's leader, correctly guesses that the source of the blast was the satellite Soul's laser cannon. Meanwhile, Lady Miyako, a messianic figure in Neo Tokyo, owing to her own telekinetic powers, beckons one of her followers, Sakaki. Nizu gets defensive over this, saying he served Miyako faithfully. However, Lady Miyako says that the situation has outgrown Nizu's ability, calling it a crisis now. She warns Nizu that his people cannot be caught off guard before dismissing him. Miyako then walks with Sakaki, assigning the girl her target, Akira. Miyako advises the girl that Nizu can supply her with information. She also laments not being able to complete Sakaki's training, before praising the child and sending her off on her mission. In the city streets, we see a red sedan parked over a sewer cover. Kei's head pops out of the opening. She sneaks out of the pipe and gets to cover, quickly assessing the situation. She's dismayed by the lack of noise, noting that not even the sound of traffic is present. She peeks out into the street, where she witnesses a group of looters smashing a store window. As this is happening, Kaneda exits the sewer, pulling Akira up behind him. As he drags the boy out from under the red car, he's caught off guard by something. A military robot is approaching him. The robot, called a caretaker, begins to blare an alarm. Kaneda is freaked out, but the spider-like robot walks right past him. When he convenes with Kei, she shushes him. She thinks something serious has happened in the city, and doesn't think he should draw attention to them. As Kei points out the rioters to Kaneda, a whole crew of caretakers enters the area. The robots bear down on the rioters, tasing them all with a single electrical blast. The caretakers then begin to emit a pre-recorded warning about the Code 7 alert the military issued in response to Akira's awakening. Through the caretakers, Kei learns that there is a state of national emergency, and that all citizens have been placed under military jurisdiction, along with the fact that any breach of peace will be severely punished. She tells Kaneda it's time to go, and begins to walk down the street, past the bodies of the incapacitated rioters. Our perspective then zooms out. A caterwaul sounds, followed by an alert proclaiming the Code 7 alert is over. The comic's perspective follows the message throughout the deserted streets of the city, down a massive stairway, and to the door of a nuclear fallout shelter labeled A5, just as its doors slide open. Citizens begin to flow out of the shelter and into the streets. At an intersection above ground, a group of children climb on a caretaker robot, before being scolded by a soldier for doing so. The kids run away gleefully, a testament to the resiliency of youth, completely unfazed by the nuclear-level threat the city just faced. After the children leave, the two soldiers stand by the caretakers. One of them says that he heard that they were built to withstand a nuclear attack. If the people had to take shelter underground, the caretakers would stay above ground and fight off invaders. He says, even if everyone dies, the robots will protect their land, which is a pretty funny line, especially if you see how these caretakers are portrayed throughout the rest of the comic. From a window above the street, Chiyoko observes the scene on the street below. She shutters the window and turns into the apartment. Inside, we see Kaneda wolfing down a bowl of ramen, as usual. Kei sits sullenly, with her back against a dresser. To her side, Akira lays unconscious. When Chiyoko enters the room, Kei perks up. She asks if Chiyoko has had any luck. She says that the phone lines are down and many people are still hiding, so she hasn't been able to get word about Ryu. She tells Kei not to worry though, before assuring her that he can take care of himself. At a government building, we see a group of politicians arguing. There's division over what to tell the media regarding the Code 7 alert. One politician says that they can't go on as if nothing happened. Another argues that Akira is top secret. Another says it's too late to worry about secrets because the media already knows. That prompts a different man to say they need to find the source of the leak, before another man tells him that it's not a concern at the moment. 307 people passed in the chaos, along with countless who were injured. And on top of that, the Akira project would represent a shift in the power scale between the East and West, which could prove problematic. All the while, the Colonel just sits and listens as the arguments continue to spiral without any real consensus or conclusion reached. The scene then shifts to the congressional hearing. The speaker broaches the rumor that the recent disaster was a result of a military test. The Colonel protests, saying that there are always rumors. A member of the panel tries to explain away the Code 7 alert as a computer error. The Colonel then addresses his reluctance to lift martial law, citing the resistance' burgeoning efforts to exploit the chaos to their advantage. The speaker attempts to cut across the Colonel's demands, but he's overruled by the panel, and the session is adjourned. As the colonel exits the courthouse, he's met on the steps by a flock of reporters. Rumors of a secret weapon have spread to the media. Even more alarming, one of the reporters asks about Project Akira by name. Mr. Nizu watches the colonel's exchange with the media from the window of his office. A call then comes through, but his assistant says he's unavailable. The caller's persistent, however, saying they're Ryu's sister, which Nizu is able to deduce means that it's Kei, prompting him to take the phone call. He opens by saying he's told her to never call him there, only to be stricken silent by her message. Sweat pours down his forehead as he learns that Akira's awakened. The matter can't be discussed on the phone, he says, as he instructs her to maintain her position. He'll be there as fast as he can. Speeding down the street in his black sedan, the colonel laments the predicament he finds himself in. He acknowledges the fact that he has little room for risks at the moment. However, he believes he can use the military emergency as cover to find Akira and take out the resistance once and for all. The colonel's driver asks if he has anything else to add, to which the colonel says that they must guard against any unscrupulous individuals using the army to further their personal agendas. Hilariously, the driver says that the colonel always uses the army. The colonel says he's willing to overlook the wisecrack before the scene shifts. Kei waits for Nizu on a freeway overpass. Unaware they're being watched by Sakaki, the two discuss the events that occurred at the Olympic site. During the conversation, Kei lets slip that she suspects Akira might have been responsible for starting World War III. Nizu thinks it's a ridiculous assertion before changing the subject. He requests that Kei bring Akira to him. He hands her a card with the address on it. Before leaving, he makes sure to remind her that it's a matter requiring the utmost discretion. As he's walking away, Kei calls out to him, asking for any updates on Ryu, but there are none. The two go their separate ways, Sakaki continuing to observe Kei from the shadows. In another part of the city, the colonel enters the facility where the Espers are now being held, following the destruction of Tetsuo and Kanada's clash at the military facility. He asks Kyoko to tell him if Tetsuo survives Seoul, which she cannot say. Undeterred, he says that he must find out where Akira is. Kyoko remains uncertain. Masaru cryptically says that Akira's eyes have opened, but he cannot yet see, which the colonel says is all the more reason to find him quickly. They must stop his awakening from completion. With a withered hand, Kyoko reaches out towards the colonel, requesting that they be released from their containment. They want to look for Akira. Energy appears to circulate around the trio, while Kyoko explains that Akira is one of them, and they miss him. The colonel grits his teeth and admits that that's exactly why he came. He needs them to help him find Akira. After night has fallen across Neo-Tokyo, Kei makes her way through a dark alleyway on her way to Chiyoko's apartment. She appears to sense someone watching her, but is unable to catch anyone, causing her to question whether or not she's imagining things. When she enters the apartment, we get yet another classic Kanada and Kei exchange. Outside, Sakaki creeps in the shadows, listening in on the conversation as she approaches the apartment. When Nizu returns to his office building, his assistant instantly alerts him to something that frustrates him. A heavily bandaged man sits on the couch when Nizu enters his office. When the man turns around, we see that it's Ryu. Nizu scolds him for coming to the office. Ryu apologizes, offering his belief that Nizu would want a report ASAP. Caught off guard by his appearance, Nizu asks Ryu what happened to him. Ryu explains that he got frostbite and had to convalesce in a military hospital. Nizu takes umbrage to this, but Ryu is adamant that he must be heard. The two sit on the couch as Ryu fills Nizu in on the events surrounding the Code 7 alert through his perspective. Ryu's under the impression he's got some real groundbreaking information here, saying that they finally know where Akira is, only to have the rug pulled out from under him with a single word: was. They knew where Akira was, but he's since moved. Nizu doesn't bother explaining the fact that Kei has him, or that he's to be delivered later. He just tells Ryu to focus on recovering before dismissing him. Back at Chiyoko's apartment, we see Sakaki stooped over Akira's bed. She beckons him to awake. In the other room, Chiyoko and Kei discuss their plan to deliver Akira to Nizu, while Kaneda reads manga nearby. He gets up and heads out to go to the bathroom when he senses something is wrong upstairs. As he investigates, he discovers Sakaki attempting to abscond with Akira. He gets pushed down the stairs by some unseen force as the two flee, managing to climb out onto the roof of the building. Chiyoko and Kei hurry in to check on Kaneda, where they learn about the kidnapping. They pull out their weapons and prepare to go. Before they do, Kaneda informs them that a telekinetic girl is the perpetrator. This sets up this great panel where the two of them are shocked when they see the absolute cannon that Chiyoko pulled out. Sakaki attempts to flee with Akira through an alley when they encounter a caretaker bot. The bot transmits a message about a Code 5 alert. Its siren wails as it admonishes the two for being out past the mandated curfew. Sakaki looks briefly scared before determination overtakes her face. She steps in front of the boy and concentrates intensely on the caretaker, attempting to take it out with her telekinetic might. But the caretaker fires off a powerful blast instead, taking the girl off guard. Chapter 13, Desperation. Chapter 13 opens with Kaneda, Kei, and Chiyoko witnessing the strike from their vantage point. They're blown away by the intensity of the blast. In the alleyway, Sakaki takes Akira up in her arms as she leaps high in the sky to evade the shockwave of the attack. She perches horizontally on a wall before pushing off again like a Mario 64 wall jump. But the caretaker is able to follow her path easily. This time, it hits its target with the laser, sending Sakaki and Akira tumbling to the ground. That's when Kaneda pulls his signature move, rushing in like a bull in a china shop. He jams a cinder block into the opening at the top of the caretaker, preventing it from closing. He then slides out of the way before the robot can attack him. Which, awesome. These things were supposedly designed to withstand a nuclear blast, but they're taken out by one teenager. At that point, Chiyoko opens fire. Her shots land in the opening at the top of the machine, causing it to topple over and explode. Inside a nearby surveillance van, a soldier checks in with the command center. He says it's business as usual, only listing off the accumulated data after being prompted. The crime seems pretty wild around there if 29 drunken brawls and 18 missing persons is normal, by the way, but that's besides the point. The soldier does have one interesting account, however. A teenager with a bum arm who sought treatment at a hospital, but refused to give ID, opting to steal medicine and flee instead. Just then, a distress signal comes in from the caretaker unit that Kaneda and Chiyoko just took out. Due to the destruction of the unit, the rest of the caretakers are being diverted to the area. We then see the trio standing over the burning wreckage. Kaneda is the first to notice that Sakaki and Akira got away. In the nearby street, we can see the two fleeing. Kaneda runs to the end of the alleyway, where he's able to pick them out and direct the two resistance members their way. However, at the same time, the caretaker bots and the military are converging on the area. Sakaki is the first to become aware of this, dragging Akira through a crosswalk by the hand, in a panel that's reminiscent of Abbey Road. The spider-like machines jump into action as the military power on a spotlight, telling Chiyoko, Kaneda, and Kei to freeze. Chiyoko has a different plan, however, instead opening fire on them. The military return fire, forcing the trio to flee down a side street. Their path brings them on trajectory for Sakaki and Akira's current position, made even worse by the truck directly on the trio's heels as they run. Thankfully, they're able to leap out of the way before the truck hits them. Instead, it barrels into a few of the caretakers. One of the spherical robots begins rolling, taking a direct path towards Akira. It looks like he's about to be steamrolled, but Sakaki pushes him out of the way, taking the brunt of the hit herself instead. As Chiyoko fires on the military truck, causing it to explode, Kaneda grabs Akira's hand. He lifts the boy up and whisks him away from the blast radius. They watch from the distance as the vehicle burns, only to be surprised to see the caretakers putting the fire out. They take that as a cue to leave. In a skyscraper, the colonel reviews the footage from the caretaker that Kaneda took out. There's a direct shot of Kaneda's face, but the colonel is more concerned with something the robot witnessed 5 minutes prior. He has the soldier rewind the footage until it gets to a still shot of Akira. Back in his office, Nizu receives an urgent call from Kei. The scene then shifts to after the phone call, where you can tell that he received bad news. I actually love this sequence because you could have missed the entire kidnapping of Akira and still understood the type of news that Nizu received on that phone call. As Nizu slouches over, sullenly smoking a cigarette, he's told that Lady Miyako desires an audience. A request he cannot deny, no matter how badly he might want to. Nizu travels to Miyako's temple, where he's told she's waiting in the Hall of Worship. Inside, we get a really cool panel of her kneeling in front of this corona, which has some significance later in the story. Nizu bows before Miyako as she questions him about Kei's role in preventing the retrieval of Akira. Nizu denies that he's still working with them, and Miyako seems to buy it. She says it's of no matter, as they're in no position to exploit his powers without her anyway. She says that they will be forced to contact Nizu sooner or later. She then goes into this cryptic allegory that essentially is saying that Nizu better not think he can be made powerful through wielding Akira, as he simply is not capable of it. As Nizu departs, he's relieved that Miyako seemingly bought his lie. However, the second he's out of sight, Miyako laments how full of avarice he is. She orders her disciples Sakaki, Mozu, and Miki to bring Akira back before Nizu's plan goes completely out of control. The scene then shifts to a waterfront warehouse. Kaneda, Kei, Chiyoko, and Akira are attempting to locate a safe house. But they think they've gone to the wrong place. That's when a blinding spotlight lands on them. Thinking they're about to get shot, Kei steps forward and states her business there. Clearly, she said the right thing, as the spotlight gets cut off afterwards. The group then boards a large ship where they meet a man sent by Mr. Nizu to retrieve them. He tells them that Nizu will be there in the morning. The following scene takes place the next day. The colonel is in another conference meeting. He attempts to explain the kidnapping of Akira, but the other members accuse him of lying. The colonel maintains course, stating he knows who has Akira as an argument to regain his command. The bureaucrats won't listen, however. Their official story is that Akira was killed by Soul. And, moreover, they insist on attaching the blame for the incident to the colonel. The colonel persists in his argument, but he's run out of the room without his command being returned to him. On his way out, he grumbles quotes from the meeting to himself, lamenting the lifting of martial law and his placement under house arrest. On his way out, he orders his subordinate to set up a top-secret meeting between all the unit leaders. Back on the Resistance ship, Kei meets with Nizu. They discuss Akira. Kei admits her surprise when learning that he was a child, but remains certain that the boy is Akira. He appears innocent enough as he peers out of a porthole. Nizu, on the other hand, prefers to maintain his skepticism until the boy can be examined. Done with Kei for the moment, Nizu debriefs with the Resistance member who runs the ship. He recounts his meeting with Miyako, saying that he swears she can see into his mind. which may or may not be prophetic. Nizu, feeling strapped for time and like the Resistance can't handle any more loose ends, orders the man to take out Kaneda, Kei, and Chiyoko. As Nizu boards a helicopter, we see that Akira is already strapped in, ready to fly off with him. Below deck, Chiyoko asks if Kaneda can discern their location based on what he can see through a porthole. Before he can, they're interrupted by a nefarious-looking Resistance member who brought them food. He's sweating bullets as he leaves the tray. Kaneda digs right in, but Chiyoko is a little more skeptical, sniffing the food before refusing to eat it. On the stairwell of the ship, Kei ascends the steps as the captain of the ship walks behind her. She questions the direction they're heading as her friends are below deck. The captain says they've already left the ship, at which point Kei becomes even more suspicious. She turns back to the man only to see that he has a weapon pointed at her. The man says it's for a good cause and that Nizu never neglects even the smallest of details, before he fires on her, grazing her shoulder. Below deck, Kaneda retches from the food, confirming to Chiyoko that it was poisoned. She jumps into action, smashing down the door in pursuit of the man who delivered it. He starts firing on her immediately, but she uses the metal door as a shield, slamming him into the wall and crushing him behind it. Above deck, Kei is still locked in with the captain of the ship. He has her in his sights, ready to take the final shot, when Chiyoko rushes up the stairs, door still in hand. The captain begins firing on her, forcing her to take cover. As the captain reloads, Chiyoko grabs the inflatable life raft from the wall, pulling the string and throwing it at the man. It inflates mid-air, reaching full size in front of his face and blocking his vision. Chiyoko uses it as a distraction and runs up behind it, punching the captain through it, sending him overboard. They're not out of trouble yet, though, as another Resistance member with a machine gun flanks her. She takes a protective stance in front of Kei, but they're saved by Kaneda's barf. He spews all over the dude.
If you're gonna spew into this.
So nasty, the guy flings himself overboard in self-defense. The trio then flees on the life raft, leaving the captain tied up on the boat as it floats in the middle of the sea. The captain of the ship frees himself as the gang flees. He's then able to get on the radio. Interspersed with his radio conversation, we see Nizu as he's informed about the colonel's secret meeting. He thinks the colonel must be losing his grip for planning a coup d'etat. Nizu's conversation is interrupted by a CB radio, however. He flips out when he learns that the captain let Kaneda, Kei, and Chiyoko get away. This is when the trio's plan comes to roost, however. They re-entered the ship in the middle of the man's radio conversation and took over, using their ruse to gain information on Akira's whereabouts in the 11th district. As Nizu leaves his office, lamenting that he now needs to handle the situation himself, he runs into Ryu. Ryu wants an update on Kei. However, Nizu denies having contact with her. But Ryu's learned that Chiyoko attempted to contact Nizu. In the middle of questioning him, Nizu just hits Ryu with his cane. He calls him a pest and drives off without offering up any answers. As Nizu's driver moves through the city, they come to what looks like a military roadblock. Suspicious, Nizu orders the driver to keep the engine running under all circumstances. When the soldiers approach the vehicle, they ask if the driver knows about the curfew. As the soldiers begin to ask if Nizu is part of the government, the little man orders his driver to speed through the roadblock. Recognition dawns on the soldier. When he realizes the small man was Nizu, he orders his men to open fire, calling him the little rat who attacks the government. The soldiers hop on a motorcycle and begin pursuit. Nizu's driver confidently tells Nizu to buckle up as he prepares to evade the military's pursuit. Chapter 14, Caught in the Middle. Chapter 14 opens with the military's pursuit of Nizu. They've begun to fire on him. His chauffeur slams on the brakes, causing the military motorcycle to crash into the rear of the car. From the shadows, Ryu observes the chase go down, wondering what kind of trouble Nizu might be in if he's willing to stir up so much trouble. Ryu gets on his motorcycle and pulls out after them. From a rooftop nearby, we see Lady Miyako's disciples observing the scene, unnoticed. They assess Nizu's path and then vanish. In a helicopter above the scene, the colonel tries to get Kyoko to use her powers to locate Akira. She said she briefly sensed him, but he's not still fully awoken. The colonel insists they must hurry. They have to find him before his powers awaken fully. On the ground, the military entered the 11th district via tank. They establish position on a bridge, right out in the open. One of the soldiers points this out, but he's told that they won't be able to avoid a confrontation this time. Just then, a massive ship approaches the bridge. It's the ship Kaneda and Kei had been held on. It's too big to pass under, and it's not stopping. The soldiers do their best to flee the scene before the ship crashes into the bridge, taking out 2 of the tanks. One of the tanks fires on the ship before falling into the water below. Kaneda, Kei, and Chiyoko watch the scene from the distance, wondering if they caused too much damage by releasing the ship the way they did. There's no time to dwell, however, as they need to get to Nizu's house as quickly as possible. As they vacate the area, the ship explodes in a massive fireball that lights up the night. We see that the explosion was large enough that the resistance members guarding Nizu's house observed it from their location. One of them runs up the steps, thinking that the blast signaled a coup d'etat, but the others dismiss him as crazy. Using the distraction as cover, Kaneda hops over the house's perimeter fence and grabs cover beneath the balcony, within earshot of the men. Meanwhile, Nizu and his driver continue their attempt to evade the caretaker bots. Nizu curses the bots as 2 groups of caretakers approach the car. The bots flank the vehicle before simultaneously slamming into the car, crushing it. The driver tells Nizu to hold on as he attempts an evasive maneuver. He slams on the brakes, causing the caretakers to crash into each other. He then hits the gas and speeds through the upturned bots, sending them cascading like marbles in the street, rendering them unable to stop Nizu's flight. Back at Nizu's house, we see that his men are now on high alert, wielding submachine guns as they patrol the foyer. Sweating bullets, Kaneda hides behind a pillar. The guard leads him to the control room, where 2 other guards are posted. Kaneda notes their numbers before adding a 4th to the list, as another guard approaches their position in a hurry. The guard runs up, shouting about the attack that Mr. Nizu just suffered. He says that the attack was perpetrated by a group who aimed to overthrow the government. All of the guards volunteer to find the perpetrators without even realizing that at least one of them needs to remain on guard duty. The lone remaining man complains about always getting left behind. As he wonders if it's because he's stupid, Kaneda manages to sneak up behind him and knock him out. Quietly, Kaneda enters a room where a child sleeps. It's Akira. Kaneda says he's come to take the kid away from all this chaos. Outside, however, the remaining guards don't get far before they're greeted by the arrival of Nizu. His car is battered, but it makes it all the way into the garage before the men close the gate behind him. The men rush to the car, trying to assess Nizu's status. The mousy man sputters and pushes the back door open. Sweat drips down his brow as he instructs his men that they must move Akira. After vacating the car, he orders them to summon the helicopter immediately. The wrecked car then explodes, sending the guards scrambling to find a way to extinguish the flames. Beyond the wall of Nizu's compound, we get a glimpse of Ryu observing from the darkness. A newscast then cuts across the panels, opening with a shot of the flaming ship from earlier. The anchor explains that a provisional government dedicated to military security has taken control of the nation. The existing administration, as well as all the terms of the country's constitution, have been suspended. The anchor closes by announcing that the new regime, which is run by Colonel Shikishima, will make a statement the following morning. As we zoom out, we see that the guards are watching the newscast raptly. As Kaneda sneaks by in the background, Akira in tow. When Kaneda skulks past, he hears the news about the coup, putting two and two together as to why the military has been maintaining such a massive presence. Just as Kaneda reaches the exterior door of the house, he's stopped by a voice telling him to halt. It's a guard, and he's got his gun pointed at Kaneda's face. The man questions Kaneda, asking him who he is. As the guard's suspicion mounts, it begins to look bad for Kaneda. Just then, we see Kei through the window. She's crouched, taking aim at the guard. She fires, sending the guard reeling backwards. She then fires again, breaking the lock on the door in order to retrieve Kaneda and Akira. Before the trio flee, Kaneda confiscates the weapon from the fallen guard. Back in Akira's room, we catch up with a frustrated Nizu. As he assesses the situation, the guards attempt to wake the man Kaneda knocked out earlier. On the wall above the empty bed, we see graffiti saying that rats like Nizu get what they deserve. Just a real chef's kiss from Kaneda here. In the middle of a coup, he's petty enough to get a jab in at Nizu. Love it. A firefight sparks outside as some of the soldiers manage to intercept Kaneda and Kei. They take cover behind some trees as a guard fires from the balcony. Kaneda attempts to return fire, but he's overwhelmed by the guard's automatic weapon. That is, until the ominous figure of Miki sneaks up behind the distracted guard. In a nearby command post, one guard receives orders over the radio as the other nervously wonders why the shooting stopped. The radio call ends just as the two guards become aware of someone's presence. It's Chiyoko, who wastes no time taking the two guards out with her bare hands before they can even fire a single shot. Kei then runs up with Akira. As Chiyoko escorts the two through the east gate, Kaneda struggles to catch up. After the gang has exited the gate, one of the guards rises. He grabs his weapon, sets his sights on the fleeing group, and attempts to fire, but he's stopped in his tracks. His face writhes terribly, then he slumps over. Mozu stands over his body ominously. As our group flees through the streets, Kaneda attempts to relay the news of the coup to the best of his ability. It seems like they're going to make a clean break, but a single, minuscule figure stands in their way. As they draw closer, they see that it's Sakaki. Kaneda's unperturbed by the girl's appearance, acting cocky as he approaches her with his shotgun slung over his shoulder. He attempts to hit her with the butt of the weapon, but she leaps up into the air, flipping over the backs of both Kei and Chiyoko as well in a single leap. Now positioned at his back, Sakaki sprints towards Kaneda. He turns heel, swinging as he does, but the girl dodges his strike easily. She then sweeps his leg out, sending him crashing to the pavement. Kei and Chiyoko attempt to run to his defense, but they then realize that they're surrounded by the rest of Lady Miyako's disciples. As the three children close in, the sound of a helicopter cuts through the night, drawing their attention. It's the Colonel and the Espers. The Colonel orders the area to be cordoned off before they even land. He also orders a reluctant pilot to land directly in front of Akira. He would rather jeopardize damaging some buildings than to give the boy any room to escape. But the pilot just can't manage it. Miyako's disciples take advantage of the distraction. Miki attacks Chiyoko's gun hand while Mozu takes out Kei's, and Sakaki grabs Akira. She beckons the two other disciples to follow her, but Kaneda manages to slow down Mozu by swinging his shotgun at her. She's able to dodge the strike, but the evasive maneuver leaves her open for an attack from Chiyoko. The large woman bear hugs a child, completely immobilizing her. Kaneda then turns his attention to Miki, taking yet a third unsuccessful swipe with the gun butt, which draws a taunt from the dour girl. Kaneda had a plan, however, taking the momentum from the missed swing to bring himself forward to land a powerful headbutt on the girl, all in one motion. It knocks her to the ground, incapacitating her. The trio, having lost Akira, vacate the area immediately in pursuit of him and the disciple, both of whom are fleeing through an alleyway where their paths cross several of Nizu's guards. They change course in an attempt to evade the guards, but their path is blocked by none other than the Rat King himself. As his guards surround him, weapons drawn, he says that, despite how it looks, his devotion to Lady Miyako remains sincere. Meanwhile, a groggy Miki approaches the scene. When she overhears a conversation, she hides so she can listen in. As he continues, Nizu mentions that certain developments necessitated he maintain control over Akira. He says he hopes to ask Miyako for her forgiveness someday, before ordering his men to fire. No shots ring out, however. When Nizu turns to inspect the holdup, he sees Miki taking out his guards. The gaunt girl yells to Sakaki to run, just before one of the guards opens up fire on her. Miki evades the blast, taking out another guard in the process. The distraction provides enough of an opening for Sakaki to escape, using her powers to bring Akira high into the sky with her. As she does, a flare is shot off into the sky. Kaneda, Kei, and Chiyoko all see it from their position, as does Ryu from his own separate position. Nizu sees his opening and attacks Miki, leaving her vulnerable to attack from his guards. They fire on the girl, taking her out once and for all. Meanwhile, Takashi informs the colonel that there are 3 girls with telekinetic powers who kidnapped Akira. The colonel is in disbelief. As Kyoko is wheeled off the helicopter, the colonel asks how powerful the girls are, to which Masaru says their powers are the same as the Espers but limited. On the street below, Nizu's guards pursue Kaneda, Kei, and Chiyoko. The group turns down an alleyway in an attempt to escape, only to come out on the other side directly in front of a military tank. Caught off guard, Kaneda freezes up. But when push comes to shove, he manages to take out the tank driver, commandeering control of the tank in the process. As Nizu's guards approach, Kaneda orders the gunmen in the tank to fire on them. The tank fires, causing a massive explosion that scares off Nizu's guards, but alerts the colonel of their location. Kaneda then beckons Chiyoko to take over the gunner position on the tank, kicking the soldier out of it. It takes her a bit to get a hang of things, but then Chiyoko gets the tank rolling. In the final panels, we see the colonel order his men to kill Sakaki and Akira if they're unable to apprehend them. Alright, another 3 chapters in the books. As you can see, Akira gets way more screen time here than in the anime, although so far he's still serving as nothing more than a superpowered MacGuffin. We'll be seeing more of him, as well as learning a little bit more about him, but admittedly, not a great deal. Still, he plays a fairly substantial role in the events to come, despite being relatively flat character-wise. On another note, this was a unique episode in the series from an art perspective. The illustrations involving flashes of intense light were interestingly colored in my opinion. I haven't really mentioned it yet because I somewhat plan on doing a full retrospective, but the series was originally published without color. This specific edition was computer colorized by Marvel imprint Epic Comics. They did so with the explicit and eager consent of Katsuhiro Otomo, however. He even signed off on the coloration of each and every edition that got printed. There's a really good extra about the localization process of the series that I want to go over in the retrospective if I do make it, so I won't go too deep right now. I just wanted to mention that Otomo approved of the entire coloration process. A lot of readers also wrote in to say that they found it at the very least to be acceptable, while many enjoyed the added depth it brought to the series. I think I'm in the latter camp as well. I also wanted to mention how interesting it is to see how they decided to render unique effects such as the direct blast from Soul in the opening scene of chapter 12. They went in a highly stylized direction, almost distorting the image, which I appreciated, honestly. I feel like it gave a great sense of power, and it's one of the times I've been happy that I'm reading a colorized version. Anyway, that's it for the episode. I appreciate anyone who watched, but I especially appreciate anyone who made it this far. I'll see you again next time, fellow nostalgia seekers.